On this episode of Dad Sews, we make
Monsters!
Smock Monsters!
Smock Monsters!
Dun 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 dun!
Dad Sews!
Dad Sews! Dad Sews! Dad Sews! Dad Sews! Dad Sews! Dad Sews! This is how it goes with Dad Sews! Hey everyone, thanks for joining me for another episode of Dad Sews. I really appreciate you stopping by. Now, in our previous episode, we made this double fold bias tape. And we did that with this awesome little bias tape maker that you can get on Amazon. There's a link below. Now, since we already went through those steps, we're going to be using our bias tape today. If you need help making bias tape, just click on the previous episode. Hey, there's a button right there. Just click it and you'll see how to make it yourself. Now, I have already cut out the fabric for our pattern. This is the first time I've used a real pattern on Dad Sews, and I'm gonna link below where you can get your own Smock Monsters pattern. I can't really put their pattern online, that would be wrong, but you can get it from them, or you can just look at the shape of this. It is very simple to figure out. You would just cut the pattern or shape that you would want on your child. It goes around their neck and down to their sides. Super easy. We're going to connect it with some Velcro and our bias tape. All right, now once you have your pattern cut out, we are going to finish it around the edge with our bias tape. Now, when we make our bias tape, you want to make sure that when you fold it over that second time, you fold over one side just a little shorter than the other side so it sticks out. That way, when you go around your fabric like this, you know that you're catching some of the back side when you sew on your bias tape. All right, I'm gonna flip the sewing machine on and then we're gonna move over and start sewing the edging with our bias tape. Okay, now on my sewing machine, I have a brand new bias tape foot. Now this doesn't make bias tape, that's what you use this guy for, but what it does is it sews your bias tape on. That way you don't have to keep track of it, the foot does it for you. Now I've got a link below where you can buy it very cheap from Amazon. That's where I got it, and it was cheaper than any of the stores I went to. Now this allows you to stick in your binding tape and then fold in your fabric that you're going to use and wrap with your binding tape. Now I'm not going to show you exactly how to use this foot because there's a really great video, and guess what? It's linked below. That's right, I linked it so you can see exactly how to use this bias tape foot. All right, let's start sewing. Now this is the first time I've ever used this on camera. We'll see how it goes. All right, well, I don't really know how it makes it that much easier than just doing it yourself, other than it keeps a nice even seam allowance. That's what I can see so far, but you still have to slowly and surely make sure that your fabric is folded into the bias tape. But once you do that, it looks pretty nice actually, and it gives you a nice seam allowance. Now the video that shows you how to use it shows that you can hold the bias tape up like this to make sure it doesn't bind, especially since I keep wanting to say binding tape instead of bias tape. All right, we're going to be coming up on a curve very soon. I am curious to see how that's going to go. I'm going very slow because I've never used this foot before. But as you can see, it's doing a very nice job in giving me a nice seam allowance. All right, I'm going to pull some more of this off of my cardboard, and then I'm going to stick this in, and hopefully we can get it going around this curve properly. All right, tuck it into the bias tape like so, and then let's go. Let's move forward. I want to be careful not to go too fast because I really want the seam and the seam allowance to look nice and tidy. All right, here we go. Oh, it's already fallen out. All right, now Now see, with the binding foot, with the bias foot, I can't really tell when it's fallen out. So I'm going to take off this foot. I'm going to go ahead and put my regular foot in. All right, now, as you can see, it totally missed there. So I'm going to have to rip this seam with my trusty seam ripper, and I'm going to have to fix that. All right, now you know how to use a seam ripper, right? You take the ball end and you put it down under the seam, and then you just kind of slide it up. All right, now we're going to refold in our fabric into our bias tape and go. Now, I'm really worried because I didn't backstitch that. So I'm just going to go right to where it was at and try to hit it close. And now I have to keep my seam allowance good on my own, which is going to be trouble, let me tell you. All right, now we move down just a little bit. Oh, this is really a pain in the buttocks. That is the truth. Boy, bias tape is not easy to do on curves. Yikes. Keeping it in and making sure you're going around the curve and making sure you keep your seam allowance is not easy. And I'm worried about this fabric puckering. Now, on the video, it made it look a lot easier than it ended up being for me with that foot. All right, now we're about to come to the corner with our bias tape. We want to go right to the edge of our fabric and no further. Stop a little short if you need to, and then backstitch. All right, now you've got to take your fabric out of the machine. All right, cut your threads right there. All right. Okay, now we're going to take our bias tape and fold it down over our corner like this. There we go. And we're going to tuck the back piece in. All right? And that's going to give you a mitered corner. And then when we tuck our top piece in, our front piece, there you go. We will have a beautiful angled mitered corner, just like that. Now, once you have it folded and held, you want to very carefully put it under the foot. Make sure your fabric is tucked in there. Hold it, hold it, hold it. Get it under the foot. Drop the foot down and make sure you backstitch. All right, now when you drop the needle down, make sure that you've carefully folded over that angled 45-degree mitered corner, and make sure your fabric's tucked in the corner of your bias tape. Now you just keep sewing. And remember to make sure you're keeping the same seam allowance and you're grabbing that fabric and pulling it inside the corner of your bias tape. Now don't get it twisted up like I just did. You want to make sure, especially if you have a curve coming up, you're being very careful, very methodical, and getting it done without puckering up your fabric. All right, I'm going to finish this up and then I'll be right back with this step done. Okay, now the awesome thing about the Smock Monster is that it comes with 3 different sizes. It has small, medium, and large. Now I'm doing a small, and the small has the 2T and the 3T option. I'm going with the 3T for my son, Ali Mac. Now, when we're done with the bias tape on the neck and around the edge, we're going to be doing these top shoulder pieces here. Now, you're going to want to leave enough bias tape that you have 8 inches once you hook it back around. I'm going to show you what I mean. We're going to go ahead and put our bias tape on. Remember, your short side needs to go on the front, okay? And you're going to come and you're going to put it right here on the shoulder side. See the shoulder top? And then what we're going to do is we're going to loop this around and then tack it in the back. Now this is going to leave you 8 inches for a small. I'm actually going 9 inches for a small, but you can size it to your child. So I'm just going to sew this very quickly on the shoulder, then I'm going to tack this on the back, and I'll show you plenty of pictures when we're all done. Pictures. All right, there we go. We are finished. We have our neck done. We have the outside of the apron done, and here are the straps coming off the side. Now, eventually you're going to want to sew these together and just leave enough room for the button, but that's going to depend on the height and placement of the little lad or lady that you're making this for. So we're going to leave that to the very end, and then we'll just finish up, and I'll show you how we do that. Now, I did have some spots around the curve where I had missed in the apron with the bias tape. And like my black grandma, Miss Ivy, used to say, baby, it ain't worth crying over. Let's just fix it. So I just popped the seams using my seam ripper right here, and I folded in the fabric, pushed it in, and then re-sewed and made sure I backstitched over it. Did that in a couple places, and now we're good to go, and we can move on to the next step, which is the actual monster part of our smock monster. As you can see, on our Smock Monsters pattern, we have eyes and a mouth and teeth, and that mouth actually opens so that you can stick stuff inside. Now this means we have to cut a hole into our apron, and that's going to go right here. And I'm using this dark fabric for the inside of the mouth. But there's also the eyes and the teeth to contend with. Now, I picked some canvas type material. I'm not going to show you how I made these circles because I didn't think you'd want to see 30 minutes of me swearing at the camera and the sewing machine. I couldn't figure out the best way to do this, so I went to Facebook, and some of my friends and sewing groups gave me some advice. Some said to use iron-on fabric on the back for stability. Some said just stitch around the edge with the zigzag to keep it from fraying. And then some gave me the suggestion that I actually went with, which was to sew 2 circles together, sew them almost all the way around the edge, then tuck them out or turn them inside out, and then sew that last little bit. Now I can put my finger in here because I have not sewn that extra bit. When I sew them onto the apron, that's going to be that final piece. I figured, why add another stitch when I'm already going to have a white stitch on the outside? Now this was very hard to do, especially with the canvas type fabric that I chose. The teeth were not so hard. As you can see, they are still open at the end. There you go. And I just sewed it 2 pieces together, sewed around the curve, then turned them inside out. I made sure to take my Fisker pinking shears here and cut the edges on the inside so that there was less fabric when I turned it out, giving me a nice, smooth, round edge. My circle isn't perfect, but fortunately, my Smock Monsters pattern shows an imperfect circle as well. So I think it came out pretty great. Now we're going to use these decorative buttons for eyeballs, and I'll show you all that when we're complete, but let's go ahead and cut out the mouth hole in the Smock Monster. Okay, now I chose to use a light box and redraft the smaller pieces of my pattern onto butcher paper. That way I didn't have to cut the original pattern, and I didn't risk losing these little pieces. I know I'm going to make more of these for my other kids. Okay, now I'm going to lay the pocket that's going to go on the back of my apron here, and then I'm going to place the mouth right at the top. Now I'll know where I need to do my cuts. I'm going to move this down just a little bit, and then I'm going to slide out the bottom piece. Then I'm going to carefully take my rotary cutter, and I'm going to cut along this pattern. Now once you do this, it cannot be undone. So be careful. And as someone recently yelled at me about on Facebook, be careful with your fingers too. She thought that I was going to lose a digit seeing the way I used a rotary cutter. Now we're going to be finishing this off with bias tape. I'm going to go ahead and do that now before we sew on the back of the pocket. Okay, we have our mouth cut. We're just going to sew it on the back of our apron. Now I'm using a coordinating color in the blue so that you really won't be able to see it. At least it won't be too obnoxious once I do. And I'm going to use a couple wonder clips like so to hold it in place while I sew it around. All right, here we go. Now, if you cut it large enough, you really don't have to worry about anything other than just making sure you do a nice straight stitch so that when you see it on the other side, it doesn't look too ugly. Now, once I get this done, I'm going to go ahead and take the pinking shears to the excess fabric just to make sure it doesn't fray any and I cut out a lot of that excess. Make sure you don't clip into the mouth where the bias tape is. I'm going to go ahead and finish this up and then we'll move on to the next step. Okay, we finished up the red inside of our mouth, and as you can see, there's a little bit of a pocket. Here, I put these scissors right in there. It's not going to hold much, but do you really want your kid running around with a lot of stuff in another extra pocket? We know what's going to end up in those anyway. Cheerios, or Reese's Puffs in my son's case. There you can see on the close-up cam how the mouth looks. There you go. And then on the back, this is where we used our pinking shears to go ahead and trim the edges so that it didn't fray any. All right, now we're going to take our teeth. Remember, that's just a piece of white fabric in the shape of any tooth you want. I have 3 different shaped teeth I'm going to put in, and then we're going to just stitch them underneath the lip of our mouth. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and place the teeth in the mouth, and I'm going to use that blue so that it's hidden right along the back side above the bias tape. All right, make sure you don't catch the bias tape and make sure you don't catch the red fabric. All right, here we go. Don't forget to back stitch. Now, I'm using canvas material, so it is nice and thick, which means you want to be very careful and make sure you're getting your stitch in, and you want to make sure that you don't break a needle. Now, when I was trying to make the eyes before I did this project for you, I tried it on my serger. That was one of the other suggestions that somebody had on how to make a circle. Well, because of the fabric I was using, a needle broke right in half and flew right up at my eye. That's dangerous. You don't want that to happen, so just be very careful and remember that metal breaks and it's sharp. Luckily, I have these glasses on, and that helped me. All right, I've got one tooth in. I'm going to show you after I finish the other 2 teeth. We've got the monster teeth in for the monster smock, and they're nice and crooked, just the way a monster's teeth should be. Now we've just got to stitch on our eyes, and we're going to do that with some white thread all the way around, and we're going to make sure we put them a little off center. All right, I'm going to stitch those on. Then we're going to talk about the button pupils. All right, we have our eyes and our teeth done. We are nearly complete. Now here comes the fun part, and by fun, I mean miserable, because we have to hand sew our buttons onto the eyes. Now you can use any type of button you want, but I'm using these nice, thick green and blue buttons that perfectly match the fabric that I chose. I'm going to go ahead and sew this now with the camera off because I'm pretty sure I'm about to bleed and curse. Lots of cursing. And this is a PG channel. I'll be right back. All right, so our smock monster is complete. It's got googly eyes, it's got monster teeth, and it's got a big mouth you can stick stuff in, like this spool of thread. Now, the next step was to put on some Velcro right on these shoulder corners. One goes on the front, one goes on the back, so it cinches up like so. Now, I did not use Sews Velcro. I used sticky industrial Velcro. It's supposed to stand up to the wash, but we'll see. I do know one thing, you cannot sew through this stuff. It's so gummy, it will gum up and screw up your needle. Trust me, I know from experience. Now, the last step is to put a button right here, and then this strap will go on that button when it crosses over the back shoulder. All you need to do is sew it until it reaches the button to make a little button loop. Now, you might need it all the way at the end, which is easy to do. Or maybe you need it a little more in the middle. So you would just sew the end of this, start sewing up to the middle until you reach the spot you need for the button. It really depends on your type. And if you don't use it all the way to the end, that just means you can pop the seam as they grow and get more use out of your smock monster. And then when it gets to the end, you can either extend these straps or give it to a friend who has a little tyke that also needs a smock monster. If you think I've glossed over any of the steps in making this, it's because either I've covered it in previous episodes on Dad Sews or I've linked information below this video. But I'm available to answer any of your questions. You can find me on facebook.com/dadsews. You can ask me anything at dadsews.com or just go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/dadsews. Ask me in the comment section and I promise I will get to each and every one of you and answer all your questions. All you need to do is cut out a piece of fabric that's shaped close to this for your son or daughter. Then you need to wrap it in binding tape, cut out a hole, wrap that in binding tape, make sure to put a back pocket so that you can stick some stuff inside. Then you cut out some white eyes and some teeth. It doesn't have to be a perfect shape, anything you want. Pick a cool looking button to go with it, and there you have a smock monster for your son or daughter. Now remember, if you don't know how to make your own bias tape, go to dadsews.com/bias tape, and I will walk you through step by step on how to make your own. Now stay tuned, you're gonna see my son, Ollie Mack, who's about to turn 3, wearing his own smock monster. Thank you for liking, loving, and sharing our videos. Don't forget, please click subscribe so you stay tuned to all of our new tutorials and fail videos. And remember our motto, sew, fail, repeat. All right, I will see you next time. This production is brought to you by the Plaid Dad Blog Podcast Network. For more information, visit plaiddadblog.com.